Welcome to part 2 of the Hogwarts wand tutorial. In part 1, I modelled the individual bits and pieces of the wand, and in this video, part 2, I'll be showing you how to make some of the materials. So with that, let's jump right in. So this is where I left off, and you can see we've got different components to the wand, but we haven't got any materials, so this is what we're going to do in this video. So let's start off with the gold. I'm not even sure that's gold actually, it could be copper or some other type of metallic material, but either way, it doesn't really matter what it is. Let's figure out how we're going to do that. So what I did in this instance is I used these textures from Ambient CG, link in the video description of course. So I'm going to use those for this part of the video. However, later in the video at the end, you'll see that I also created a procedural version of a metallic copper gold look. So if you're more interested in that, jump ahead to the end of the video and you will find screenshots there of the node setup. Alright, let's create a new material. Give it a nice name. That seems appropriate. Wand metal. Now, Node Wrangler, if you have that enabled, what you need to do is select the principled BSDF and press Ctrl Shift and T, and then select a handful of materials that you want to add instantly, which is awesome. But word to the wise, go through and inspect what's just happened, because Node Wrangler works really well when the file names are spot on. If they're not, it may not accurately interpret the right files for the right nodes. So go through and just check they're all plugged into the right place. And you can see there under metallic, it's used the color file, which isn't right of course, so that needs to be replaced. So we just remove that, go back to textures and select the metalness. Just like that. Very important, set it to non-color. If it's without any color data, make sure it's set to non-color. That's really important. What I'm doing now is, because we don't have any UV textures, or we haven't unwrapped these objects, right? So I'm going to set all of these to the box method for the mapping. Do that and also apply the blending to something like 0.5. I'll do that on all of the texture maps, that's really important. Let's make a bit of space, duplicate that last one, connect up the map in there as well. Select displacement map, and we're going to use that as the bump node. So let's make a bit of space. So now we have a normal map already plugged in, but you can stack them as well. You can add in a bump map and stack it with the normal map. So let's move that down and add a bump node, drop that in there on that line. Here's the height. So we drop that image into the height and give it a value of something like 0.075. Again, a value of 0.075 is what I used. Yeah, you can see there the blending is set to 0.5 for all of them. So I'm just double checking I've done that, I haven't missed anything. That's great. Now going back to the video, you'll notice the color is not as rich, shall we say. So that's quite saturated, that one. So let's add a color hue saturation value node. Let's just drop that in and lower the saturation to 0.6, and the value the same, then it looks absolutely fine. Of course you can add any metallic material you like. So again, quick inspection, make sure everything looks good. And now it's a simple case of just applying the same material to all of the metal parts. So select it from the drop down list, just speed through that, same thing. do play around with the HDRIs built into Blender just to see how everything looks, and there's the node setup that I used with the textures. As I said, if you prefer a procedural method, jump to the end of the video, and I've got a nice, fairly complex, but not too complex, node setup there that you can replicate for yourself. Right, let's move on to the planet, or the teeny tiny planet. So create a new material, give it a nice name, and I'm going to start off with a noise texture. And make sure you change the coordinates from generated or UV to object. And let's plug that straight into the base color and the roughness. Now let's tweak some of these parameters here for the noise texture. So I went with a value of 8.73. It's a bit random, but something like that is fine. Detail all the way to 15. And let's add a touch of distortion. Let's isolate that. You can isolate an object by pressing the / or question mark key on the keyboard. Then we can make some more adjustments to this. So let's introduce a color ramp. Drop that in between the noise texture and the base color. And here are the values I used and their positions. So feel free to pause the video there and add those hex values to each of those nodes on the color ramp and their positions. Alternatively, just add your own colors and do whatever you feel looks pretty cool. So far it looks like a bowling ball maybe. So almost done. There you go. That looks pretty neat. Maybe not so planet-like, but it doesn't have to be ultra realistic, of course. Let's duplicate that, drop it there onto the roughness, and hit the backspace key to reset that node to black and white. And here are the values that I used for the color ramp there. It's a couple of short ones. Let's quickly do those. And finally, just lower the white a little bit. Control Shift and click, by the way, if you want to see individual nodes, then click back on that to see. Control Shift click on the principled BSDF to see it in its full glory. Right, so there's the node setup for the planet. If you want to make something a bit more complicated, go for it. Right, let's move on to the marble thing, or stone thing, whatever it is. I called it marble. It doesn't look like marble, does it? But it is what it is. So again, we'll start off with the principled BSDF, and now we're going to add a Voronoi texture. Once again, connect the object to the vector. I find that gives really good results. Let's just make a couple of changes here to the Voronoi texture. So I change that to distance to edge, and let's add a noise texture again, just beneath that. Now we want to add a color, mix color node. The intention here is to connect, or not connect, combine these two nodes together. So we can do that with a mix color. So we can drag that into the first slot and drag the second one into the second slot. And change the type of blending to linear light. You can't see the effect yet because it's not visible in the viewport, but it will be in a second. Let's connect that up to the roughness. And if I Control Shift and click that, you can see that's the Voronoi texture as it currently stands. This is the noise texture. In fact, we need to make sure we plug in the vector. There we go, the map in as well. And then that's the mix of the two. So you can use the factor now to determine how much of a mix you're getting between those two nodes. So somewhere in the middle is pretty good. Or you can go all the way to 1 depending on what kind of look you're after. So I left it at 1 there, which is probably in hindsight not the best idea, but we'll come back to that later on. So now I'm going to introduce a color ramp again, drop that into the roughness from the linear light or the color mix node. And again, here are the values that I used. Feel free to pause the video and enter those as well. Let's just quickly do that. We can't really see the effect because obviously we've just got a white color for the material, the base color. Right, let's duplicate the color ramp we just added there. Let's make a bit more space so you can see what we're doing. And now add a bump node. Connect that into the normal. Color into the height. And the linear light into the color ramp. So that's working, and the strength is clearly too much, so bring that down to a more sensible value. I went with 0.075. Doesn't look quite right yet, and like I say, I'll come back to this later on and just finish off tidying up the bump node. I'll give you a big tip. In the noise texture we added, turn the detail to 15. And that will resolve the issue. Anyway, in the meantime, I've added another color ramp, plugged that into the base color, added another noise texture, and here are the values that I used. So I think it was 2.8 there. 15 should be for the detail. Roughness value of 0.65 and a touch, or not a touch actually, 3.7 on distortion, which is quite a lot, but there's the effect of the noise texture. You can see there. Kind of got this swirly type thing going on. We'll plug that into the color ramp. Doesn't matter which one you plug in, to be honest, whether it's color or factor. I went with factor, as I usually do in most cases. And let's just bring in these values again. So we've got these for the base color now. So I'm going for the kind of blue wand, as I said earlier in part 1. So let's just put these in and see how that looks. And this is the lighter color of the two. And finally their position. So around 7.75 is absolutely fine. So something like that looks pretty cool. You get some interesting lines in there. Now you can see the effect of everything together now. As I said, the bump is a little bit off. That's because the roughness, so the detail on the noise texture we added earlier, isn't set to 15. So do that now or do it later. You can see there the detail is set to 2, which is the default. Right, here's the values as well. Pause the screen there. You want to duplicate that? Great. Now let's move on to the wand, the wood part of this lovely object. Let's zoom in a bit there, try and get to see what we're doing. And we're going to add again a noise texture. Control T to add these two nodes. Now, do bear in mind this one should be on generated, not object. Again, it should be on generated. I found that works best for this type of wood effect. And then plug the color or the factor into the base color of the printerboard BSDF. And of course, a color ramp to sit between those two. So here are some more values. Sorry, there's quite a few there. So I'll probably fast forward through this. Hopefully I did. I wouldn't want to sit and watch this again. I think you get the idea by now. And put them in. Or choose your own values and approximate positions. So we're getting there now. You can see this the type of wood, very fake wood looking wood, to be fair. And let's go back to this nice texture and make some changes. I went for a scale of 7, detail to 15 again. Get a much finer grain. Roughness of 0.75 or 0.78, somewhere around there. It's quite awkward to see the whole effect because it's going from top to bottom, so let's make the screen bigger. Have a quick look around. See how that looks. That's not too bad. It's a good start, at least for now. So next, it's another color ramp. And plug that into the roughness. And of course connect the noise texture to the color ramp. And Control Shift and click that so we can see our color ramp effect on the noise texture. And here again, here are some values that we're going to copy over. Luckily there's only 2, so not too bad. Sorry I didn't fast forward it, but I didn't want you to miss it, I guess. So you can see the effect that's having now. We can do the same for the specular. So I'm going to copy that and plug that into the specular. And of course, don't forget to connect up the noise texture. These are fairly similar to the roughness ones, so they're fairly close. It's a little bit more contrast in the specular. In fact, the first colour is very different actually from the roughness one, but it needed that contrast for the effect to work. That's the same anyway, so there you go. That's made quite a difference actually. It helps to avoid the dark parts having, you know, a specularity. Helps to add a bit more depth. Now the bump node. Let's add a vector bump node. Connect the normal to normal. And of course the noise texture to the height. And I'm going to add another color ramp. In hindsight, I don't need that rerouting node, so just Control delete that one. And let's just have a bit more control over our bump map. So the first color is black, and that's at that position. Something like 0.8 is fine. 87, 087. Second one's DE, DE, DE. Or da da da. Don't forget to turn the strength down. I went with 0.2. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah, I'm not going for ultra realism here. It's quite a stylized look and feel. That looks pretty cool. So happy to go with that, Here's the node setup for the wand wood. Let's go back to that marble or stone material, and we're not quite done on this one yet, because if you look at this one here, it's not perfectly smooth and it's got these kind of displaced parts along the handle. So we can do that with a displacement modifier. So head over to that area, add a displace modifier, and it just bloats away there. So click new, give it a nice name. I went for marble displace just so I know what it is. And then we can head over to the texture properties that we just created, and I'm going to go with Voronoi. And have a look over these, play around with these drop downs and values and see what works for you. We're trying to go for a certain type of look, so I didn't really change much here, as you can see. Now the strength is way too much, and you can change that in the modifier. So I went with a value of something very, very low. Not 0, that's too low. Yeah, 0.2 is not bad. Sorry, 0.02, not 0.2. 0.02 is pretty good. Now there is one thing that's not quite right, and this may not bother you, but we don't want this to be affecting the top and bottom of our stone marble area. So we can use a vertex group to help us out here. So with the object selected, head over to weight paint. Now these are the ones that we created earlier in part 1, where you've got the metallic areas, the grooves. So create a new vertex group slot, give it a name. Marble displace is what I've called mine. And if you've never done this before, don't worry. It is fairly straightforward, to be honest. Make sure your weight is set to 1 and the strength of the brush is set to 1 as well. And all you need to do now is just pivot around, orbit around the object, and just paint in where you want the displacement to be effective. So here, basically red means it's a factor of a strength of 1, and as it cools down to blue, that value of 1 goes to 0. So that's all that is. So if you go too far down, change the weight to 0, now you're painting out, i.e. negatively. You're taking away. Now you want to add, put it back to 1, and just work your way around this. So you can see it's nothing complicated. There's a couple of bits you can fill in as well. Doesn't have to be perfect. Could have probably gone a little bit lower if I zoomed in a bit more, but for the purposes of this video, then that's absolutely fine. Just tidied it up a little bit there. Something like that. And make sure I'm not hitting that top part. So brush with a weight of 0, and then put it back to 1 again when you want to add. I think that's fine. Let's go back to object mode, go to our displacement modifier, and now we can select marble displace, and that would only affect within that area that we painted. So quite a cool technique to learn that, and it's actually quite simple. There's nothing too complicated about it really, and don't be afraid to experiment. So I'm really happy with that. It looks pretty neat. Now we've got the stars there as we said, and the grooves. They need to be gold as well. So we're going to apply the same material as we did for the rest of it to the groove and the stars. And at this point I noticed these red visual glitches, so I turned off the modifiers, double checked the mesh, making sure there's no holes in it, and there shouldn't be, of course. So let's just have a look around here and apply the metallic. So going back to the vertex groups, I selected the metal area. Again, check out part 1, that's where we did all this. we've got everything selected. And with that, head over to the material properties, add a second slot, and from the drop down select the metallic material, and don't forget to hit the sign. And that's working as expected. Brilliant. Yeah, that bump doesn't look great, but as I say, we'll fix that later. Yeah, you can see there these red marks. That's obviously not meant to be there, so it took me a few minutes to work out why this was happening. And you'd be quite surprised what the actual problem was. I didn't expect this at all. So basically I went through and just turned off things, checked the model. Did I do something, without realizing it? So anyway, at this point I thought, let's just crack on, select all of the stars. I did that by clicking on the first face in the middle, and then Control plus on the numpad to expand and grow the selection. So we've got the stars selected there, and apply or assign the wand material, the metallic material again, to those parts. So now that's really good, that's fine. So let's get back to this issue that I was seeing. There it is again. So yeah, trying to figure out what's going wrong here. So bear with for a second, and we'll jump to the shocking conclusion. At this point I decided to remove the stars from the weight paint that we did earlier, because obviously that's distorting that quite a lot, and I thought, well, if I remove these from the weight paint, that probably helps to fix those issues there. You can see there, as you paint away with a weight of 0, the displacement effect is taken away. So I'll speed this up because it took a few minutes to do it, and just work your way around. The other thing I would say is make sure it's quite tight around the shape of the star. Don't want it to be too soft outside. So with that, let's have a look and see how that looks now. That's better, but we still see some glitches there. So there it is. Can you believe that? Face orientation. Very strange, never seen that before. And there's a first time for everything, right? Lesson learnt. Okay, let's get back to this bump map thing. And let's go down to... First I tried to play with this, but it wasn't that. That's fine as it is. Now, that's a clue that right there, because the blending is quite harsh. So turn the detail up, and the roughness, to get the result that we want, which is something like that. If we switch back to the final look, that's much better now. Looking very nice. And that's the node set up for the marble stone thing. So we've got all of our parts in a collection called wand. They're all individual objects, and what I like to do is create an empty and group everything to that empty. And the reason you want to do that is you can then manipulate this object, scale it, animate it, just by using the empty, and not having to worry about all the individual parts. Plus, if you join them all together, some of them they're all going to have different modifiers, so it would just be a mess basically. So at least this way you don't have to worry about any of that. Just assign it to the empty, or parent it should I say. Probably a good idea to rename the empty. And then with that done, you select all of the objects, and then you select the empty last. And then you can press Ctrl P and parent to object, or you can select object keep transform, whichever you think. Yeah, it doesn't make much of a difference at this point. You can see the options there if you forgot to select it. And that's it. So now you can obviously see these are still individual objects. Nothing's changed. It's exactly the same. But if we select the empty, and I just press R twice to rotate this, you can see that we get total freedom now on manipulating the wand, which is really cool. Right, here is the procedural method that I came up with. I didn't use it earlier on. I did want to deep dive into this, but this is the node setup, and here it is. It's not too bad actually. So take a screenshot, pause it, and do that. So thanks for joining me today. Thanks for watching. A like and subscribe is appreciated if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video. For now, take care. Bye bye.